we'll just jump right into it. 5 reasons why you should stop playing Wizards of the Coast's D&D. Specifically, Wizards of the Coast's D&D. Let's see it.
Greatest role-playing game. It's the greatest role-playing game in the world. Hundreds of millions of dollars in sales per year. A new movie with Chris Pine in it. It's the heyday of Hasbro's Wizards of the Coast Dungeons & Dragons, but if you aren't read into the ugly part of this success story, I want to share some thoughts with you today. I'm going to formulate these thoughts into 5 items under the heading Reasons Why You Should Quit Playing WotC's.
You mean 5 pillars. 5 pillars.
Version of Dungeons & Dragons.
Actually 4.
Let's just jump right in. 1. It's not the best version of D&D. Dungeons & Dragons...
Okay, without jumping into his talking points right away. 5e not being the best version of D&D, I would actually... This is a tough pill to swallow. Hang on. Okay. I would actually argue that 5th edition was the best version of D&D. Now, in its current state, especially where we see it going, I would at best say that it's a version of D&D. But I would argue that 5th edition was probably the best simply because it gave a lot of DMs power without limiting options it was a very digestible version that called back to the spirit of I guess the game as a whole, right? What the game was meant to be about. That's what I would say. But let's see what he says.
5th edition is hard to run because it continues with the long-standing expectation that DMs spin all kinds of plates. Ben Milton of Questing Beast addressed this and termed it...
Is he trying to say that it's because... Well, okay. So, there are a lot of resources that... correct. So there are a lot of resources that Wizards decided not to give the players and the DMs. So when it came time to run the game, there was a lot of baggage. He's right. There was a lot of baggage that felt like you were missing context. You were missing key pieces of the puzzle to actually run the game.
A crisis that has resulted in a drastic shortage of DMs to run the game at large. It's totally true. Yeah. 5e is a pain in the neck to run, especially when you consider the expectations of new players and people who have learned how to play by watching...
Wait, what? What did that say? What did that say? Yo, I saw that shit. Hang on.
Players and people who have learned how to play by watching Critical Role and Stranger Things and other exaggerated portrayals of an ideal almost...
Yeah, exaggerated. Yeah, a lot of people have... dude, if you're paying for something, you should explain stuff. I remember talking about the missing... Yeah, like, okay. So here's a perfect example. So, first off, okay, to address this point, people will look at the standard of Critical Role, and if you don't know what Critical Role is, imagine, a bunch of voice actors, because that's what they are. Imagine a bunch of voice actors, like professional voice actors, getting together and playing the game, right? And at that point, it becomes this very theatrical experience where everybody is a professional and everybody has very lovable characters and everybody's fully in the game. They have a very good vibe with each other. Everybody is playing the game in its peak state, right? The DM's popping off, the players are popping off, and everybody's having a good time. And it's a very watchable experience for some people. Now, I cannot personally watch D&D being played. I think it's very boring to watch. But this is D&D in its perfected state. And same thing with Stranger Things, because I actually just watched this episode. I'm actually watching Stranger Things right now. You have people that are very emotionally invested and very, very emotive about what is occurring. And everybody's having a blast. Now, I have had the same experience. But the difference is the characters are not as fleshed out. And basically what's called the Mercer effect, what has happened is players will come into a game after watching Critical Role or after watching Stranger Things, and they're going to play a DM roulette. And the moment they hop into a new game, whether or not it's with friends or strangers, immediately, if they do not voice act or have a voice changer or tell their story in a way that is reflective of what they learned from Critical Role or Stranger Things, and suddenly, this is the Mercer effect, then suddenly they're just going to dip out of the game and say, "Fuck it, you're not playing the game right. You're not a good DM. You're not playing the game how you're supposed to play it. You're supposed to play it like they play it in Critical Role. But you really also don't you don't really want to try to appease these kinds of players, right? You don't really want to try to appease these kinds of players. They're very picky, and ultimately the game should be fun with friends or maybe acquaintances at best, and everybody should get into the atmosphere of it despite maybe not having like the perfect voice acting or the perfect maps or all the peripherals that a lot of people bring out. And plus, I mean, you look at the fucking screen cap right now. People don't consume D&D in this way anymore, at least at large. Most of it is digital, which is why they're making the big push on D&D Beyond. So a lot of this atmosphere is lost. And even when I'm playing digital D&D, whether I'm DMing or not, I can't get my head into the game. It's so fucking hard to get my head into the game.
Mythical session of D&D. In actuality, the combat is slow and plotting. The characters get way too powerful, way too fast.
True.
And there are too many weird player options.
Like my players at level 7 took out a CR13 encounter. But a lot of that, I've argued as well, comes from the magic items and the options that you allow your players to have as a DM. And myself as a DM, I basically said, okay, I'm going to make them more powerful so I can throw bigger shit at them. And I told them at the onset, make strong characters. Okay, you don't have to over optimize, right? But just make strong characters for the campaign. And after a few deaths and a few TPKs, well, one true TPK, the other one was bullshit. They finally understood, and we're here where we are now.
That have departed so far from a cohesive sense of lore or universe that the term kitchen sink.
This one strikes hard for me. So a lot of my experience, my primary experience comes from 3.5. So I'm going to talk about 3.5. In 3.5, when they introduced a subclass. Now you have to understand that a lot of them were rather setting neutral. But also, they would do their best for what IPs that they actually owned. They would do their best to tell you where your subclass, or not your subclass, sorry, your prestige class or your race or whatever fit in, right? They would say for Forgotten Realms, they might be located here or follow this tradition or culture, or in Eberron, they might follow this or that, right? In 5th edition, my fucking GOAT example is the Astral Self Monk. The fucking JoJo monk. They did not give two shits to tell you where that comes from, what they do, what they're all about. You have zero lore with the JoJo's Bizarre Adventures monk. And at best, you bring it in hoping that you might be like a pseudo-psionic character or something, but typically people just play the fucking subclass for the meme. And you have no idea if it's like where it would be in the Forgotten Realms, where it'd be in Eberron, where it would be in Dragonlance, where it would be in fucking Ravenloft, where it would be in Exandria or any of those, right? They have no tie to the lore whatsoever. They kind of started off, with the Player's Handbook and obviously Sword Coast and different books like that in the very, very beginning, or even Xanathar's, giving you a very dry run of like, okay, this might be located here, or followers of this might be, but they dropped that quickly, of course, right around when what's his name, Mike Merles left, right? Mike Merles didn't leave. He got, demoted into running something over at fucking Magic the Gathering because he stuck his neck out too far trying to defend a fucking, a sexual assault, assaultee, I don't know. And, once Mike Merles left and Jeremy Crawford took over, Jeremy Crawford's no lore approach basically made all the subclasses not fit into anything, or the races not fit into anything. Look at the fucking Harengon or the Ardling, right? And suddenly you get this bullshit ass. You end up essentially. You don't know where you fit in the world, and neither does your DM. Is basically what it is. You have no idea what's going on with the character that you made, and they just have to kind of write you in. And that's fine, I guess, but not really, right? Not really.
Doesn't even begin to describe it. And it's almost every last page of every last official 5e book, written in a way that feels like the authors are trying to pad the page and meet some sort of page quota. So
I believe
what
that.
is
Yeah.
the best version
Yeah.
of D&D? That's completely subjective. You might have had some incredible times with friends or randos online or at a game shop using 5e, and no one can take that away from you. But in terms of a version that actually delivers tactical combat in a way that actually feels substantive.
He's going to say 4th edition, we all know, but it's fine. It's fine. We know what 4th edition was about. We know it's not really D&D, but it was just gamified. Literally, one of the 4th edition books that I took inspiration of for a very edgy part of my campaign that I've since cut, literally had a picture of Arthas Menethil holding the fucking Frostmourne. Like, unashamedly, Arthas holding Frostmourne on the front cover is how gamified 4th edition was. And just short of saying it was Arthas, it was literally Arthas, and I could probably show you the fucking picture later of how it was exactly Arthas with the exact Frostmourne.
Tactical, the current form of D&D 3.5e, Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Oh, okay. No, dude, no, don't say fucking Pathfinder, dude, okay? Pathfinder, listen, man, there's too many fucking options, okay? Don't say Pathfinder. That's not even D&D, okay? That's when you take D&D and you rip off the fucking boundaries, you tear down the walls and you say go. And you just fucking, I mean, okay, I have no experience with Pathfinder to say that's accurate, but I just remember combing through player options and they would include Pathfinder shit back when I played 3.5. And back when I played 3.5, I thought, okay, well, I want to find a character that can turn his strength modifier and use his wisdom instead. And I'm like, oh shit, they don't have that option. I'll find a different way to do things. And then I'm like, oh wait, they do, but it's Pathfinder. Oh no. And then, along with Pathfinder comes like, well, if you just want to basically say fuck it and be every class simultaneously, then just pick Pathfinder shit, because it just gave you everything that 3.5 didn't. And as much as I love 3.5 and all its various rules to make whatever kind of version of thing you wanted, or like make any kind of character you wanted, Pathfinder, like you still need some rules to have a coherent game. And Pathfinder decided, fuck the rules, do whatever you want, literally. And that's not quite it. It's just a little bit too far for me. Where 3.5 is just barely on the edge of just 52 different official splat books. It was barely on the edge of just too much, But it kept it interesting. Rip off WoW because no one knows what D&D's about. I mean, it brought in that audience, though. It gamified the 4th edition, gamified everything, and brought in a different audience that, people who played and started with 4th edition love 4th edition, but it wasn't. They weren't playing Dungeons and Dragons, was the problem.
Crushes 5e in this department. And in terms of a version that gives DMs and players an approachable palette of Western fantasy to work with, and which actually trusts those parties to use their imagination instead of spelling out every last thing.
Okay, that's not 4th edition.
Empowers the DM by not dumping superhero PCs in their lap.
That's not 4th edition.
That version would happen to be BX, or BX with a sprinkling of...
The fuck is BX? What?
AD&D as presented in Gavin Norman's Old School Essentials. The problem at the core is that 5e is a bloated mess for GMs to run, with gameplay...
5e is not bloated. That's the wrong word. 5e is not bloated. 5e, if anything, is under-bloated. 5e, if anything, needs more bloat. But it needs more bloat in the sense that it doesn't just reference things, but it actually tells you what those things are, right? Forgotten Realms, Eberron, whatever, right? It tells you what those things are. And truly exemplifies like everything about them, rather than just hiding behind like, oh yeah, there's like this eastern area in Toril and on Faerun, and that's about it, guys, have fun. And tell you nothing about what the eastern area is past what it's called, Karatur, right? They don't go into anything because they're ashamed that it's going to be like culturally insensitive or whatever. And they've only developed like the medieval European area, obviously the Sword Coast, and past that they've done nothing else with the edition in this, or the setting in this entire edition.
A series of combat encounters that get worse and worse as the players ascend to HP bloated godhood. And I know hope springs eternal. For example, Dan DeFazio of Dungeoncraft, someone who I feel has some authority on the subject of D&D, says top D&D designer Chris Perkins just might simplify the Dungeon Master's Guide in this next iteration of D&D and save the whole franchise. But just some food for thought on that. The 5th edition...
So if you're talking about nothing else but the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you cut out any sort of reference of bloat, and you stick it, if you put the context entirely on the rules, then yes, I agree, it is bloated, and that's only because exploration is not padded out. there is not any clarification on things like, say, mounted combat. There's a lot of things you basically need sage advice for to run the way that we can only assume was the intended way to run it based on what fucking Jeremy Crawford says, right? But overall, I would say you don't really. A lot of people who have this opinion haven't actually read the Dungeon Master's Guide. If you actually sit down and read the Dungeon Master's Guide, you actually have a pretty good time. Right, I think the Dungeon Master's Guide, the DMG does give you everything you need, but you have to sit down and consume it and digest it and chew on it. Right, you can't just open it up when you need a certain thing and expect to find it, because you probably fucking won't. You probably won't find what you're looking for, which is probably an issue. But you have to really understand and know the book before criticizing it. A lot of people just don't read their DMG, I think. It helps when you really like dungeon generation, treasure. You understand that the game is actually on a progression scale, and no one even knows that there's a progression scale in D&D because they don't read the DMG. You're supposed to hand out, a certain tier of magic items at a certain level range and at certain intervals, right?
Of D&D is almost entirely encapsulated in the player's handbook. And maybe Perkins will have a hand in streamlining that book as well, but the company has already bragged that they aren't going to make any big changes to the 5e rule set, wanting instead to establish their game as so good now that it basically doesn't need to change.
No,
so
wrong.
Really, don't get your hopes up for a simplified official new version. It's just going to be the same convoluted mess. And really...
But they have said that. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that, that's the wrong approach. But yes, they have stated outright that they're going to be focusing less on rules iterations and more on just promoting the game through various mediums and developing those mediums. And also the fucking battle pass.
I don't know why there's any faith placed in Chris Perkins on this front anyway. He wrote what is considered one of the, quote, best official adventure supplements for 5th edition, Curse of Strahd, and I personally spent weeks trying to untangle the contents of that book and make it usable for my table.
Now, that's okay. Curse of Strahd is a very complex book. I agree. There's a lot of bloat in Curse of Strahd that I personally find makes it hard to run. But Curse of Strahd is not a bad book. If anything, Curse of Strahd is the perfect book for atmospheric development of your parties. It's meant to evoke emotion. And through that, there's a lot of narrative bloat that you have to give your players, but also you have to read the fucking book before. Very weirdly laid out. Yeah, I mean, it is weirdly laid out. I do model a lot of my own writings on Curse of Strahd, but only because it has a... If you take out Castle Ravenloft, that's the important one. If you take out Castle Ravenloft and you actually just run through the other areas like the open world and the towns and villages, it's very digestible. Castle Ravenloft is a convoluted mess. And the fucking maps, like you have to... I literally had to take the Curse of Strahd, the fucking Castle Ravenloft map, and go to someone who made it topographical rather than the fucking isometric to understand what things were referring to, because I had no fucking clue from the isometric map where things were labeled and how they were laid. I agree with that, at least. But I think the way that they modeled, Area 2, Section A for like a village or something, I think that's fine, and I like to model things off of that pretty well. But with Curse of Strahd, you definitely have to read the book and really digest it. Same as a DMG, to really get into how, like, you have to know what's coming before your players do, which is a pretty duh statement, right? Pretty obvious statement. But I think if you're just trying to DM it and you haven't read that section before and then you jump straight into that section, you're not going to be able to run it successfully. You'll have no fucking clue. And that's really half the problem. I don't think that's really a book issue, though. I think it's just a prep issue. But again, if it's Castle Ravenloft, then yeah, good fucking luck, man. I tried to make my own fucking castle, like a little mock vampire castle based on Raven. I gave up. It's just too much. It was too fucking much, too ambitious. And they made it in Curse of Strahd, obviously, right? They made it, but my God, dude, it's a fucking nightmare. It is a fucking nightmare.
This book is Perkins' crowning achievement. Don't hold your breath for simplicity.
What is he made a fucking storyboard for it. That's cool. Look at that. Yeah, that's neat. I like that. Wipe out bad werewolf, optional spare good werewolves. Okay, I like that. That's a pretty cool way to do it. Okay, yeah, it's digestible.
5e is not even the best version of D&D 5e. What I mean by that is that there are well-established games that outdo 5e at its own themes, which shouldn't come as a surprise since 5e has overextended itself in trying to be a game with the most mass appeal. First, there are games that are actually like what people who have never played 5e think 5e is like. Fantasy, fast, and fun is what they're hoping for. And it's actually 13th Age with its much more streamlined combat and...
Can somebody tell me what this game is? 13th Age? I've never heard of that before. That's interesting. Is that based on like the 5e SRD? Because I would check that out actually. But I have no idea what he's talking about.
Non-combat mechanics, or Fantasy Age, which comes with better exploration rules and deeply simplified character class options. Also, Shadow of the Demon Lord, which was created by a former 5e designer, does come with the baggage of a very dark setting, but rules-wise is much more logical and simple than 5e. And by the way, that game is about to get a sequel that sheds the whole grim dark theme, so you're going to have a completely superior game to 5e. Look for Shadow of the Weird Wizard in 2023. If you want big fantasy heroes doing big fantasy things, then Cubicle 7's Age of Sigmar Soulbound is just more honest about delivering the goods. You're explicitly a fantasy superhero.
Yeah, but okay, here you can't just compare 5th edition to other supplements and other tabletops and expect to have a cohesive argument here. 5th edition, you have to remember that Dungeons and Dragons rests on its laurels, right? And that's half the appeal and also the problem of D&D as a whole, or at least as far as 5th edition is concerned. Because you have a game that people are naturally going to pick up and try because of its namesake, right? Its pedigree is already going to attract players. I guess the same maybe as Warhammer. Out of all the examples he's given, this one right here, Soulbound, is a Warhammer supplement, so that one might attract people based on its. But it's still not. It's not actually Warhammer. It's a different. Warhammer itself is a game. It's a genre, same as D&D is. But basically, people aren't going to pick up the other supplements and play them and run them. I guess what I'm saying is it's not really a fair comparison to either side. When you have a game that is so much more than just its gameplay, right? You have the lore, the settings, the creatures, you already know the races before you play the game. You know what it's all about, right? Like, it's basically up front with you. Everybody kind of knows what D&D is before they pick it up, right? For the most part. I mean, if you've never played it before and you don't know how to play it or how it's played or anything, like, you still know, like, all right, there's going to be elves, there's going to be dwarves, there's going to be, shit like that. And it's a lot easier for people to digest playing D&D than some random, tabletop one-off, like, supplement that no one's ever fucking heard of before, right? So comparing them in that way is a little disingenuous. Like, it's a little like intellectually dishonest, I think. But mechanically, I know he's talking about pure mechanics. Mechanically, you also have to keep in mind that D&D 5th edition is based on 3.5. And while it's trying to attract new players, and it can do so successfully, I think, because it has, right? To say that it's a bogged down mess like he's describing, and it's slow paced and whatever, that's only because of either most games having new players, because they do, there's mass appeal, you're not playing with the same sweaty neckbeards that have played the game for fucking generations. I think every table that I sit down at has one or two new players, and I have DM'd for almost exclusively new players the entire publication cycle, right? Or you get new DMs because people have to be a DM to have a game. So naturally it's going to be slow paced, and a lot of people are going to do things their own way, and again, not read the DMG, not read the player's handbook, have no idea what the fuck's going on. That's not really a problem of the game. When you look at these other tabletops, they might have clear and concise rules, sure, but ultimately the people playing them, and the comparison you're making is that the people playing them know the game, because there aren't that many people playing the game. It is what it is, right? D&D can be fast if you have a DM that snaps his fucking fingers and says, go, quit fucking around and taking 20 minutes on each of your turns because you have too many options to look through. That's a player problem or a DM problem, not a game problem. IMO.
In that game. And again, the mechanics are much more approachable than 5e. For example, zones are used in combat instead of a grid. Another example of high fantasy with extreme action is Savage Worlds for Pathfinder, which Long story
Definitely a
short,
Pathfinder
uses the
nerd.
gonzo but approachable rules of Savage Worlds and applies
Pathfinder
them
enjoyer.
to Pathfinder's very well-conceived fantasy world Golarion, replacing the crunchier rules of Pathfinder itself. If you want a dungeon crawl, put your 5e books down and pick up Torchbearer, or Dungeon Crawl Classics, or Old School Essentials, which is...
But dungeon crawl is probably the best thing that D&D can do. Problem is, a lot of people don't do dungeon crawls. Like, a lot of DMs just end up doing open world, and it's ironic because there aren't very good rules for open world exploration. There just aren't. Like, dungeon crawl in D&D is great, actually. It's really good. But you have to write in the mechanics that players experience, and now I think there could be more tools to supplement, DMs writing dungeon crawls. But that doesn't mean that, the system is inherently bad for dungeon crawling. If anything, it's better. Because when you look purely at mechanics, and you have, a blanket challenge rating or something like that, well, suddenly you can really up the ante by introducing, a trapped room, a flooded room, or something like that, right? Some environmental effect within a dungeon, or again, limiting the light and really making them work. Like, there's a lot you can do to supplement the rules as it's intended. I think it's intended for, not just to have like, a blank area, like an open space to fight a fucking, a party of 4, level 5 characters fighting a fucking CR5 or 6 creature. Like, I don't think that's really the design intent. And I think, again, if you read your DMG, the game does find dungeon crawls if you just read the fucking DMG. I think these are very disingenuous comparisons because a lot of the people playing these games are much sweatier, much more passionate about their, Torchbearer, whoever the fuck plays Torchbearer, right? They're a lot more passionate about their game, and they're gonna blow the tits off it, right? Versus D&D players, which, a dime a dozen, like everybody's a new player or, has their Mercer effect or whatever it is. They're in it, half-heartedly, and myself included, even, right?
Again, a recap of D&D BX from the early 1980s. Each of these games is dedicated to the actual details of dungeon crawling. They have focus on the matter, which means you get a more focused experience without the GM having to backfill all the shortcomings of the 5e rules. If you want the mythical party-like 5e experience that is depicted on Critical Role and the Eddie Munson Show, then go ahead and pick up Index Card RPG. This is a game that tried in every possible way to leave out unfun elements. So all you're left with is a quick-moving role-playing game that almost feels like old-school Zelda with its gear-based abilities, and GURPS with its ability to adapt.
Yeah, if I get that, I'll just pick up Munchkin. Because who wouldn't want to just, like, or Munchkin, whatever the fuck it's called, man. Who wouldn't want to just, like it's a fucking parody party game with shit, people, beer and pretzel. Like, that's fucking Munchkin, man. Like, that's all you gotta just get. Or Call of Cthulhu, maybe. I think people play that. I haven't played that personally, but that's another big name. Like, this guy clearly has like a very experienced palate with underground tabletop games, sure, and I respect that. But I think his opinion certainly doesn't. I agree with him in a lot of ways that 5e sucks. Don't get me wrong. I can respect the guy's opinion, but I think he's too far off the deep end with. I think there are very few people on this planet who would know the world that he knows, right?
To any setting you throw at it. If you want just straight up superheroes, pick up Mutants and Masterminds, or again, Index Card RPG with the Vigilante City supplement if you need something fast and super easy. Its chiefs, directors, and shareholders think you are livestock. If you haven't heard, there was a recent shareholder or stakeholder meeting where the top corporate officers at Wizards,
where the people asking the questions weren't even stakeholders. They were part of the larger presentation that led the fucking presenters or the fucking representatives of Hasbro directly to the exact thing that they wanted to talk about. I can't even call that a fucking shareholder meeting, man. Granted, I didn't participate, obviously, but I heard that the fucking dialogue from it, and I can tell you outright, those are not stakeholders asking questions. Those were just part of a larger presentation to obviously be publicized because everybody got, word of this, right? And I even watched it myself. And there's no fucking way that anybody suggested this nor was necessarily happy with it from a player perspective. From a stakeholder perspective, nobody really knew to drive the model toward let's call it Genshin Impact, right? No one inspired that. What happened was our buddy Cock and Balls came into power, and Cock and Balls decided Mr. Cox, the new father of this endeavor, as he called himself, the father of it, came in from, I think, Microsoft or Xbox or whatever the hell, and said we're gonna give this shit a fucking battle pass, basically. I mean, I haven't heard, guys, I joke about it, like they haven't said battle pass yet, but I know it's what's coming, man. It's gonna fucking happen. Let's keep going.
Wizards of the Coast were basically reassuring people that they know the Dungeons and Dragons franchise isn't making enough money. And this, despite record profit margins in 2021, so obscenely high that the CEO of WotC was made CEO of its parent company, Hasbro, but that they have every intention of fixing this under monetization problem. I've left a link below.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. Because it's not like every corporation had massive profit and massive success throughout the entirety of COVID. Now, guys, from the outside looking in, okay, if I detach all emotion from it and come in, blank palette, obviously the brand is under monetized. Obviously, they could be doing much more with it in the same vein as fucking Genshin Impact, Overwatch, etc., right? They've literally referenced the digital games market as their inspiration for doing this dog shit to us, right? But how it's such a risk to the current player base to try and milk them this way, I feel. I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, I just don't like it. Okay, I can't really argue. I just don't like it, man. I've said it plenty. I just don't like it. It is what it is.
To a recording of part of that meeting so you can listen for yourself. But in a nutshell, they want to monetize more players rather than just the DMs of the hobby. And they want to do this by expanding their multimedia offerings. More movies, shows, toys, board games, collectibles, and most importantly, for you as a gamer watching this video, subscriptions to access D&D's RPG game content.
There it is. Yep, there it is. That's the golden line right there, okay? I've talked about it before. Did you see the death counter? Yeah, it was tucked up there. But yeah, that's the golden statement. So they try to hide the Yeet campaign. Larissa of the Yeet campaign, sure. They try to hide the fact that they're going to be monetizing the players under this 4-pillar approach that they've talked about. Again, the video games, the fucking board game shit, the toys, the movie, sure. I mean, that's all fine, right? And Baldur's Gate 3, out of all those, it's gonna be a banger. The movie looks like it's gonna be pretty good, right? That's all fine, and I would 100% support that. But they hide the main intent of their monetization plan underneath or behind all those things. But what they're actually doing is, again, comparing it to the digital games market, and they're gonna milk everybody for every fucking penny they're worth. Because DMs buying books that they then share with their players or whatever, that's not good enough. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it like a fucking CS:GO skin, Overwatch 2 skin, whatever it may be. How about $10 for your favorite subclass? And we're gonna pump that shit like you ain't fucking seen before, man. Like all the content you've been wishing for in 5e, it's coming. Okay, it's gonna come. But it's gonna come. With a price tag on it from now on that you cannot get in a compendium. You cannot get in a book, a $60 or $40, $50, whatever fucking book anymore. It's going to be digital content that you have to either subscribe to, like a battle pass, or you pay the iron price and you fucking front load purchase that shit because you just want that one thing. And then you get that one thing. And then you're gonna come out with like 50 other things. Pump it out again like you've never fucking seen before. And it's all gonna have that same $10 price tag on it or whatever it may be. And if you wanna play, the newer, greater thing, which I'm sure they're not gonna have time to playtest any of it because who gives a fuck? They don't listen to playtest feedback anyway, so who gives a fuck? If you wanna play that thing and keep up with the power creep, you bet your ass you better buy it. Or like someone else said before too, they can make it all seasonal, right? They make it all seasonal, and you have to fucking you have your content for like this one season, and then the next season you don't have it anymore or something. I mean, I don't know how they would do that, but that's a possibility, right? They could find a way to do it. The digital games market does it. Fucking Magic the Gathering does it, right? So they'll find a way to do it, and they'll do it, man. They'll find a way.
As the great Mitt Romney once said, corporations are people, which isn't true.
The great Mitt Romney.
But if corporations were people,
guys, I am happy to say that both in the Democratic Party and the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, we can all come together and collectively agree on one thing: fuck Mitt Romney. But if it was seasonal, what if your game goes longer than a season? Yeah, see, exactly. Like, there's a hole in it, right? Like, there are things that they could probably... Well, if your game's on D&D Beyond, then they could find a way, I guess. But, you know, that wasn't my primary suggestion, but I think there is a way to include that model. And it's not that you couldn't play with, you know, if you're talking, like, you know, seasonal by year. If you look at, like, Magic the Gathering, you have your set for that year, and then when the new set comes out, essentially your other cards are outdated. You could play with outdated material if everybody around you also has outdated material that they want to do, but that model could work, but it probably wouldn't be that popular, you know? Not for a tabletop, at least. Are they going to get rid of physical source books now? I think they will. I think they will. And I think they will because if you look at, when you talk about under monetization, if you buy, like, for example, if I buy a book and I go to DM for my table, I'm going to give them my player's handbook, I'm going to give them my supplements, and then they don't have to buy those things because I provide that to them. And even D&D Beyond its current iteration, like my DM right now has provided my table with basically all the books he owns, so I don't have to keep buying them now, right? Like, fuck buying Spelljammer. Who wants to buy Spelljammer? So I think what they're going to do is they're going to clamp down on a lot of that, same thing as like Netflix password sharing, and they're going to make it to where you, as a player, want to subscribe to different player options that your DM probably isn't going to subscribe to himself because he's going to be more focused on the DM material that they're going to put out. That's going to be divorced from the books. You look at it right now when the books are coming out, already player options are bare minimum none. Fucking Dragonlance came out, and we got the Kender, and we got the Lunar Sorcerer, and that was it. And the Kender is an embarrassment of a race. I'm actually playing one, ironically, but mechanically, like, they're just halflings, but they're like shittier halflings with a taunt, which they're trying to divorce culture from race, but they still include a racial for a taunt. It's all convoluted nonsense, man. They're just fucking, I don't know, man. But player options in main supplements are gone, and now I think you're just going to be buying those things through D&D Beyond, or maybe like little one-off sets at best, right? Like maybe you get like a 5-pack at a store, you know, get like a certain set of fucking races for a certain setting or something for, you know, say $30, and that's going to be maybe buy a pack at best, but otherwise it's going to be piecemeal, one at a time, like a digital game skin is basically my best comparison. I think it's what they're going to do. They haven't come out and given the monetization plan yet on that side of the fence. They've given it for obviously their 4 pillars with the movies and shit, but they haven't really gone full bore into the how they're going to milk the players for every dime they're worth setting a part of it yet. So that's about where we're at.
they could for the most part be considered sociopathic. All a corporation ultimately wants to do is increase quarterly earnings, growth at any cost. Any cost. If you look at a game company like Modifius or Free League, it's run by a handful of people who try to make the best games and game supplements that they can because that's how they're judged. If they succeed, they get to eat for another year, but if they put out games that suck, they'll fade away pretty quickly. They are flesh and blood people trying to survive. Our sociopath corporate body friend, Hasbro, on the other hand, is playing a completely different game. They are orders of magnitude larger in size, and they wield a marketing budget that dwarfs every third-party and independent RPG.
Sure, but even if you remove Wizards of the Coast, or even more explicitly, if you remove Dungeons and Dragons from the Hasbro clutches, I guess, you still have a game that rests solely on its pedigree that will still always be bigger than your favorite neckbeard fucking, group of maybe 6 friends at most, people that all own, for some reason, this thing that no one's ever fucking heard of before. Like, they're still going to beat that out despite Hasbro's backing or lack of. It's just like a lot of tabletop games just will never see the light of day. I do have high hopes for the one that I think the old Blizzard execs are making. All of the best people from Blizzard left, and I think they're making their own tabletop game. I think that one might do. It might do some things, right? Because that'll appeal to a larger customer base than the one that's already swallowed up by, D&D, by Hasbro, right? But other than drawing in players from outside the genre. These other ones just aren't going to compete ever, despite how good they might be. And I'm not saying they're not good. I've never played them. LARP says that they're not good, and I'll take his or her word for it. But aside from that, majority of people aren't going to fucking touch them. I certainly know when I walk into a game store, I'm looking for D&D shit, man. I'm looking for D&D shit, dice, or like props, right? And they fill their shelves with a bunch of shit that I'm never going to touch. And I can't fathom that the people outside that store are going to either. It's typically those that hang out there and they have to play the game for like a certain set night for maybe like a sponsorship for the store, for the local store. They're the only ones that are ever going to touch it or hear of it, you know?
Publisher's budget combined 10 times over. They don't need to make a great RPG or improve on their RPG substantially in any way. The D&D role-playing game is just one small cog in their operation, and that operation is to extract money from you and hobbyists like you at regular intervals as if you were milking cows on an industrial dairy farm.
Yep, true.
And what they intend on feeding you is smaller.
Yeah, and listen, I agree with this guy a lot, okay? I agree with this guy a lot. I don't think... And yeah, like you say, they're terrible. Yeah, I think his taste in games is a little skewed toward the maybe nonsensical at best. But I do agree with him that Hasbro is certainly not keeping the player's best interests in mind. Obviously, because they're a corporation, he's giving all the whys. The whys are obvious. There's really nothing that wouldn't set them in this direction because we have the digital games market, again, that has already done this. It's 2022, moving to 2023. Video games, we talked about horse armor the other day, right? We started off with the fucking horse armor for Morrowind, or maybe it was Oblivion. I think it was Oblivion. And we just went on a downward spiral since then. And gamers just showed more and more, like especially sports gamers, like people that play fucking NBA or FIFA for some fucking reason, especially let the shit pass. They showed what gamers are willing to spend money on. And unfortunately, more people are willing to spend money on nonsensical shit than they are not. And vote with their wallet and protest it. So corporations are going to keep on doing it. So naturally Hasbro says why not, and they're going to do it. And we can't really stop them because, I mean, listen, they own the IP. And as much as we love the IP, it's just that is the current gaming climate. Same as we can't control the social climate, even though we can protest as much as we want. We can't control the gaming climate either. It is what it is. They're going to make their money on whatever means people want to spend money on to do, and that's about it. So, I mean, the guy's passionate. I agree with him. But I mean, we talked with Xana, way back at this point, and we can't really stop it. It's not. We have to accept it, move on, and it's just. I'm not gonna be happy about it. I'm gonna bitch every fucking day about it. In fact, but it's just where we're at, man.
And smaller bits of CUD in the form of online microtransactions.
What is CUD?
It started with the digital dice, but soon it will be 3D environments and artificially scarce digital goods. The inconvenient truth is that they always had bad intentions, but they weren't as good at carrying them out before. Take, for example, the fact that since day one, all 5e books have retailed around $40 to $50, but are glue bound and will sometimes fall apart on you.
Yeah, that was always a problem.
With
but I mean, again, intellectual dishonesty. You sent your shit back to Wizards, and man, they would bind that shit up for you and make it all pretty and send it right back, man. They were really good about product replacement, and I think that that's something you have to specify. It's like, okay, now my books, I was lucky enough I had no printing issues in any of my books. I do own a lot of physical books, man. My backpack can't fucking hold them. I own a lot of them. I had no issues, but I heard of a lot of people who did, and a lot of people who they went through the proper channels and they got that shit fixed, and they were cool about it, man. Wizards did their, I mean, they did it justice, and they made up for the mistake, and it's fine.
Economies of scale, where making more of something makes it cheaper to produce, they could have mustered some stitch-bound books at $50 a pop, or maybe partnered with a company that doesn't make such embarrassing minis. But no, this is a sociopath trying as hard as they can to make as much profit as they can. The only thing you have to look forward to from them now is parody levels of D&D merch garbage and bald-faced digital grift on the virtual tabletop.
I mean, true.
Who are you really supporting when you buy an official 5e book anyway? CEO Cynthia Williams, a corporate veteran of Xbox Live's player retention and Amazon's e-commerce departments, and her colleague Dan Rawson, who just came from Microsoft 365.
The father.
Look, I know there are some people out there who criticize freely.
Matt, you talk about the fucking shareholder meeting. I gotta mention Mr. Cox. Come on, man. I gotta keep the joke rolling, man. I mean, it's free material, dude. Come on.
For making too many games these days or picking up IPs that they don't like. But the guy at the top of that company designs the games himself, and he plays them too. I'll make a gentleman's bet with you that Cynthia Williams and Dan Rawson don't playtest the questionable RPG supplements that they're selling. Do they really deserve your money?
No, they don't give a fuck.
Writers are squeezed for word count at best, exploited at worst. Have you ever seen those handwritten notes found in clothing and other products that are secretly put there by the workers in the factory where the
No, in fact, I'd probably argue you haven't found that either, dude. Okay, you probably haven't found that either. I don't think anyone's ever found a fucking, a help me note from a fucking Chinese sweatshop or wherever they put the fucking sweatshop for any of their product. Ain't no one fucking found that before, man. Just stop.
Product came from, imploring the consumer to get them help since they're working in horrible conditions against their will. This is the exact feeling I get when I read official 5e rulebooks. I get this sense that the contract
I do agree with that.
Screaming in anguish as they try to fill page after page with something creative or useful, but there's a supervisor behind them that's asking them for more and more.
Yeah, I think it's disingenuous to use the adventure supplements for that, though, because the adventure supplements actually have, if you're a DM and players, listen, that shit's there because players will find a way to get there, right? Like, I'm sure not every group is going to experience, C10 the kitchen, right? Not every group's going to fucking C10 the kitchen, but there's going to be that one motherfucker who says, okay, well, I'm going to go to the kitchen and smooze the fucking, lady chef behind the man, of course I got to fucking right in the kitchen, man. That's just less work for the DM. Like, we like shit like this, man. That's good padding. Bad padding would be when you have the entire fucking 80... maybe, okay, LARP, maybe you can help me out because you probably have a better memory for this shit than I do. Or someone. Xanathar's with the fucking name generator for like the last, I want to say 80 pages of the book. Or fucking Tasha's just spamming like table after table after table of nonsense toward the back of the book that, might barely get used, but was otherwise like barely referential to any kind of like lore or setting context whatsoever. Like, I fucking look forward for that book for the Far Realm stuff, and then it's got a fucking table, like a big ass table. Like, that to me is padding, right? That's just nonsensical options that you roll and don't really like elaborate on whatsoever. Like, this stuff is better. Like, we want more stuff like this as a DM because then we don't have to think, right? That's good padding.
More pages, and then they just collapse into writing filler that only looks like it's supposed to be used in an RPG. And as it turns out, these contract writers don't get paid much. Why should they? They're receiving the privilege to write for the greatest role-playing game in the world. They'll gain so much respect and reputation after...
Yeah, but you're a writer. Like, a lot of people don't get paid at all to write anything. Like, I don't give a fuck if you pay the writers well or not, man. If I were a writer, if I were a career writer for a good company, man, fuck, I wouldn't care about my pay either, man. I'd just be happy to have the pedigree, Like, look, I'm a fucking Wizard of the Coast, man. I can do everything that people as a fucking... Like, he has a slash S at the bottom, okay? I see the slash S, okay? That's not going... I see the slash S, okay? I get it. But still, I think, like, listen, man, if I got paid to do what I do right now, writing for DM shit, man, I'd be fucking happy, dude. I'd say nothing.
In Ravnica's whatever, that they'll be a known quantity in the industry. Unfortunately, the low pay isn't the worst of it. I won't get into all the details in this video, but you should read Orion Black's account of working as a creative consultant at WotC's. I'll leave a link below. Basically, they might steal your ideas as a consultant, present them as their own, and then cut you loose.
I finally understand what he's saying when he says WotC's. Wizards of the Coast is WotC's. Dude, I've been hearing WotC's the entire video, and I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? I thought he was talking about some other, like a third-party owner or some shit of Hasbro that was like a big name or something. It was fucking WotC's. I get it now. Okay. Let's keep going.
This is no game working for WotC's. Third-party 5e content, on the other hand, is a place where writers and artists can actually make a living. And coincidentally, it's where you see the most unbridled creativity for the underlying rule set.
All right. Let's talk about creativity, guys. The Alehouse Drake. Squat in busy bars. Perched in hiding places throughout busy taverns. Discombobulating touch. They gave a CR half Drake spells 3 a day like confusion. Like dissonant fucking whispers. And it's a charisma caster. With a +5 to hit. Guys, there's a reason why third-party materials suck. Wait, it has 65 hit points and a challenge rating half. They suck because not only can they not balance, but their ideas are stupid. Okay? That's why they suck. This creature is not balanced. It has no semblance of any comprehension of the rules whatsoever. and it's just a stupid idea. Okay, it's just a stupid idea. The entire thing is dumb. All right, I don't know who wrote it. I don't know what supplement's from. I guess it's a tome of beasts. I'm never gonna use a tome of beasts. Okay, I'm just not, and that's why. Someone had too much time on their hands, but not enough time to read the fucking rules and make a good idea.
I personally feature third-party 5e content on this channel because of those things.
I'm sure you
Their
do.
creative merit and the underlying morality or lack of amoral exploitation in their creation. But since we're being frank here, I do think that making a great third-party 5e supplement or adaptation is like making lemonade out of lemons. The lemonade can be quite tasty, but it's a real design challenge. RPGs are so much more than D&D flavored fantasy, and it's never been a more interesting time to branch out. So we covered the versions and offshoots of D&D itself, which might be better than 5e, as well as games which do the various things 5e tries to do, but better. But believe it or not, this is just peeking through a tiny keyhole into the world of RPGs.
Yes, because there's too fucking many of them, and they're all shit.
Experiences that you can have in a role.
That's a bad take. They're not all shit. It's just no one's gonna play them. No one knows about them because I mean, they're just not going to, right? It's just oversaturated with a bunch of shit that no one's ever going to pick up. Everybody and their mother wants to be like everybody wants to be an artist and everybody wants to be a writer, okay? That doesn't make them all good. There are some diamonds in the rough, but even if you discover the diamond in the rough, the problem is you're not going to get anybody to play it with you, okay? So it just exists. Like, we get the argument that 5th edition is not the best game, okay? But the argument is disingenuous because it's the only game, or I should rather say one of the only games, that will actually appeal to the masses because of its pedigree, regardless of its current state, right? Regardless of who owns the IP. You bring up Warhammer as an example. Warhammer's IP has been passed around more times than a fucking hooker on a Friday night, man. It is what it is. Like, you can't compare anything to. It's just not. Yeah, it's just a different. The place he's coming from. Let's just watch a fucking video.
Role-playing game besides Tolkien-esque Gygaxian fantasy. That's been the case since the early 80s, but really, games have never been as varied and well-conceived as they are right now. Just looking at the games I've reviewed on this channel, there's a whole...
I mean, actually, you know what? We can say one thing. I think something has been lost. I really do feel a sense of loss in the fact that we don't have the tried and true 80s fantasy anymore. And what do I mean by 80s fantasy? I mean, think like He-Man, Thundercats, Conan, like Arnold Conan, right? We've lost 80s fantasy, like the sword and sorcery fantasy, or even like the old Dragonlance supplements where, the one now, like, I mean, it's good, but it's not like 80s good, right? We lost something that I don't think will ever be brought back unless you look at obviously Stranger Things, but even Stranger Things doesn't really, I mean, it's a one-off, right? It's not really like it's a piece of media, but it's not like a genre of like, it references those things rather than being that thing, if that makes sense, right? It's not that kind of fantasy. It's more grounded in realism, right? But we lost that 80s fantasy genre that I'm sad I wasn't alive to really truly experience because I'm a 90s kid. But I mean, whatever.
Cyberpunk genre, which can come in the standard flavor of Cyberpunk Red,
I'm tired of Cyberpunk.
or the originalist flavor of Blade Runner, or maybe a modern take like Hack the Planet.
Not that I know Cyberpunk, I haven't experienced Cyberpunk, I've never played it or watched it, but I mean, the genre itself, the reason why I never want to get into it is because I'm just tired of that concept, right? That doesn't appeal to me.
Games where you can play as a kid on a bike, uncovering mysteries in your small town. Games where you are out in space, either in some official IP like Star Trek, or something crazier like Battlelords of the 23rd Century, or Nibiru, or Death in Space.
What is Nibiru? What
are
these games?
You can learn sign language in the course of play, or make up your own language with everyone at the table. The 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu, along with its monster manual, is so well polished that you could exist in that dark world with friends for years. Then there are
One day I would like to play Call of Cthulhu. One day, I have no idea what Call of Cthulhu even is. I'm a huge Lovecraft nerd, and I'm very sad that I haven't yet played Call of Cthulhu.
Plethora of solo games where the objective is to spin up a tale of survival or suffering, or even just something for the sake of being epic, all with a journal and a pen.
This guy's a very experienced
paladin. That emulate the trials and tribulations of being a teenage monster or a teenage superhero, and others that perfectly recreate the experience of the Jurassic Park movies, or the Expanse novels and TV show, or Dune, or Judge Dredd, or G.I. Joe, or Transformers. It goes on and on and on.
Sure
These are just a small selection of RPGs that I've reviewed over the years. And in total, on my channel, I haven't even uncovered 5% of the best games out there. With all this in mind, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and their upcoming 1D&D service product game are an infinitesimally small glimpse into the wider world of role-playing games. Some people argue that we need WotC in order to bring more people into the hobby, but the absolute need for growth is really just another myth that's drilled into our heads from birth. It's true that growth of the hobby could lead to ever more and cooler RPG experiences for more people, but if it's at the cost of getting milked by Hasbro...
We need 5e to expose people to the genre. That is not a myth. That is not a myth. That is true. Okay? Most people will not touch tabletops unless it was through D&D. All right, most people. Now, I got into the game through playing. I don't care. Okay, most people have watched Critical Role, have probably gotten to the genre through 5th edition. Okay, and most. By the way, Boo's Astral Menagerie. Boo's Astral Menagerie. Wait. Oh no, fuck. But never mind. That's the wrong Boo. The other book with Boo's name on it is actually a good ass book. You guys should. It's a good book actually, but not that one. Fuck Spelljammer. The Spelljammer is awful. But most people do need Wizards and do need 5th edition and do need Matt Mercer and do need these things to actually be exposed to the tabletop genre. Okay, your little like game store one-off books that hide the fucking shelf all the way in the back, man. Ain't no one gonna touch that shit, man. Ain't no one gonna know it's there. No one's gonna fucking pick it up and play it because tabletop games are a multiplayer experience, and if there's no one to play the game with, then it's a dead game. Okay, digital games work because they have a lot of pedigree behind them. They have a lot of advertising, a lot of fucking hype, right? There's no hype for the oversaturation of people wanting to be artists and writers. Okay. It's much easier to be an artist and much easier to be a writer than it is to be a game dev or someone who can actually go, or a team, right? A company or an indie dev that can go out and make a game. Okay, it's just a different skill set that's much more complex, much more difficult to get into. Is a much more as a fucking budget for the stuff, right? You need to have like the actual money to produce the shit, let alone the team to make it. Unless you're a really small team with a lot of time, right? It takes more to make those games, and therefore there's a lot more promotion behind them. These games, it's a dime. These fucking supplements is a dime a dozen to fucking make your own. Granted, it's a lot of work. It's hard, sure, but it's not in any way comparable to. We probably all know someone who's made a fucking game before, like a tabletop game or a card game or something. We all know someone who's done that, man. It's not as hard, and therefore there's just an oversaturation of that shit than anything else. And yes, there are diamonds in the rough. But no one's gonna fucking play it, man. It is what it is. No one's gonna fucking play it, okay? So you can't even compare those things to D&D and act like you don't need D&D to expose people to the tabletop genre, okay? It is what it is.
Gaming division, and at the cost of writers and artists getting underpaid and exploited, then I think it's fair to say that the cost might be too high. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the new year.
Sure. All right. Well, guys, it sounds like he reviews a lot of the under-the-table stuff. So, I gotta say, okay, Dave Thaumavore, he probably reviews a lot of the shit. He says he reviews a lot of shit, okay? So if you want to find some new stuff to get into, do check him out, okay? Like, I have my disagreements with the guy, but I agree with the premise, okay? I agree with the premise that 5e sucks and Wizard sucks and they're a corporate shill. Not a corporate shill, I mean, they're literally a corporation, so they gotta make money and they're just doing it on our backs, okay? Like, D&D is becoming, because it's such a well-known IP, such a big IP, it is becoming a large corporate product where the heart and soul of tabletop games, the last bastion of, not being a piece of shit, rests in the hands of indie devs for that genre. Tabletop indie devs. You can't even call them real devs, right? But writers and artists, right? Sure. I agree with that argument. But that doesn't mean people are going to stop playing D&D. Okay? We're not going to trash and abandon the hobby, even though we want to. Because you'd have no one to play with. That's a very hopeful fantasy.